There we go.
All right. So am I starting this fiasco? I'm introducing the fiasco.
Thank God we rehearsed this shit, you know.
Yeah, we did. You're already drinking. We haven't even started yet, and you're drinking.
Well, given my
Oh,
company,
God.
I'm going to have to do this just to kind of get through this entire thing.
Let me tell both of you right now. You keep this up, golf's going to turn to boxing, and nobody's going to watch anymore. Nobody's going to care anymore. Nobody's going to know anything about anybody who's doing it. So tell me, both of you, what the hell are you doing to this sport? Brian, go first.
What are we doing to this sport? Well,
Let's start with Liv.
it's always been about the Benjamins, but it's gotten to the point now where I mean, greed doesn't even begin to describe what is happening to golf right now. I mean,
But you don't think guys are out there to grow the game, Brian? Explore new formats and grow the game. You don't think that's what this whole thing is all about?
You're saying grow the game in the same sentence that we're talking about the Saudis basically sports washing a multi-billion-dollar entity as their entree into other sports. Yeah, I fail to see, and maybe smarter minds than me can flesh this out for me, but I fail to see how the Saudis and private equity, two entities that are only used to eating from the biggest spoons they can get their mouths around, are going to do anything to grow the game. Maybe you can enlighten me, Gary, and I would certainly like enlightening.
Well,
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, if I can. Let me ask you, Gary. Unless we got Don King and Bob Arum, which we may have, what difference does it make what the Saudis do? Who's going to stop watching golf? Who's going to stop playing golf? Who's going to stop supporting golf?
Well, and let's put aside, which is a difficult thing for a lot of us to do, but if we put aside what the Saudi government represents, okay. As far as who's going to watch golf, I mean, okay, in football, for example, you do have some dog games. Like yesterday, some people were forced to watch the Miami Dolphins play the New York Jets.
Just easy. Calm down.
And just as a side note, by the way, in scheduling this, I forgot that this was tonight where my beloved Philadelphia Eagles are up against the Seattle Seahawks. So if you see me look away at my phone from time to time, please forgive me. But I mean, there's a desire among any sports fans to, want to see the best players in competition. Now, with the advent of Live and the way things are, we get to see that 4 times a year now in the majors. Maybe that's enough for some, but I'm somebody who, there's a certain subset of golf tournaments where there's a good field, and this takes place at courses like at Riviera, which I know is one of Brian's favorite courses to play at. There's the Players Championship. There's the tournament at Quail Hollow every year, which always attracts a great field. I mean, we want to see the best golfers, in competition as much as possible. And what, at least under the current, the current state of things, we don't get to see that. And I think that's a damn shame. And I hear from more and more people, they're watching less and less golf. Golf to begin with is a niche, kind of a niche sport to begin with. When it
is a niche sport,
right? And it attracts a certain clientele, and if we see ratings go down on the PGA Tour, and we already know that ratings on the Live Tour are pretty much non-existent, that can't be good, for the professional game.
Gary, let me take that one step further. Less and less people are watching golf. More and more people are playing it. Participation's gone up every year since 2020. It had dipped between 2017 and 2019, and now it's starting to go back up again. Mm-hmm. So people are playing the game. The problem you're going to have is there is now, with the advent of Live and with the advent of these signature events on the PGA Tour, where they're playing for 20 and in the case of the Players Championship, $25 million purses. You are making the game unsustainable from a professional standpoint. Already, you mentioned the tournament at Quail Hollow, an excellent tournament to mention to prove my point, right? Because Wells Fargo just pulled their sponsorship from that event. What's happening and what's going to happen is you're going to have these events, and the purses keep going up and up, and the revenues these tournaments are producing keep dropping. And so what's happening is you have an unsustainable model. And this is what the PGA Tour is running into. They're getting squeezed from both sides. They're getting their marquee players, especially the John Rahms, the Brooks Koepkas, the Dustin Johnsons, are getting pulled off to Live. And then you've got this core group of workmen, the worker bees, the James Haans, the Dillian Frattettis, and all the people of that ilk that are screaming for more and more money. And the tour's like, we don't have the money to pay the Dylan Frattettis of the world and the James Haans of the world. And they're sending memo after memo to the tour saying, hey, we want our piece. We want our piece. When's the last time you went to go see a tournament because James Hahn or Dylan Frattetti was playing in it? That's the problem that we're having here with this just constant grab for dollars on both ends of the golfing elites, of the golfing spectrum.
Right. Let me ask you something, Gary. Let me say something. Do you remember replacement football when the players went on strike and some of the players started coming back? And there was the idea that some of the players thought, we don't need the league if we have the stars playing. It doesn't matter what auspices they're playing under. We're going to have the best players playing, and that'll draw fans. And what they discovered was that fans really wanted the umbrella. They wanted the imprimatur of the NFL, or it didn't matter. They were just, these great players were just in stadiums playing ball. It really didn't matter. There was no connection. With Live, the fact that it's not the PGA, does it really matter what players they have if the league itself, if the umbrella under which they're playing is not accepted by people who watch golf?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that being borne out. The answer is that, Live is not it's not a product. It's a product that's going to appeal to certain fringes of the golf audience, but it's not going to appeal to the mainstream. And if looking at it more broadly, if you look at Saudi involvement in different sports, and let's take soccer for an example. They formed the league, the Saudi, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's a professional soccer league in Saudi Arabia. They've signed a few big names like Ronaldo, and Brian can probably fill that a little bit better than I can because he's more of a soccer geek than I am. But the point being is that, yeah, they've gotten a few big names, but the Saudi Soccer League is crap. And signing John Rahm to Live is not necessarily, it's just not going to make Live any more legitimate than what it is currently. You sign John Rahm, Live has his team concept to it. So that means they'd have to come up with 3 more golfers. And chances are the 3 more golfers that they come up with are guys you'd never heard of. It's just further dilution of the game, in my opinion. Oh, Brian, well, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I mean, Liv's ratings, television ratings, you said non-existent. There are infomercials that draw better numbers than
Yeah.
what live telecasts do. I mean, here's a great example. Last year they had an event at Bedminster at Trump's Club in New Jersey. 187,000 viewers on a Sunday. It was running concurrently with the PGA Tour playoff event in Memphis, the FedEx. That drew through 3.2 million. It's unwatchable from a TV standpoint. I don't know if you've ever watched it on the CW.
I'll tell you exactly how much I've watched. I was picking up a pizza in my local pizza place one day, and they had it on there. So I said, well, what the hell? This might be the only exposure I ever get to this. I watched for about 10 minutes, and I've said this to Barry before, and I'll say it again. It's like watching a 1980s video game with really bad graphics. I
It's
mean,
exactly what it was.
Presentation is just horrendous.
But how was
the reason I'm laughing is because the only time I watched it was when I was getting my car washed and I was sitting in the waiting room and they happened to have it on. And it was the same the same scenario as you. I'm waiting for my car to get washed. You're waiting to get a pizza.
Right.
And I was watching it.
To be fair, you could have been watching Fox News. So, that's.
Well, I would have much rather been watching soccer, frankly, than watching, Arlo White and Jerry Foltz, who was a friend of mine when I worked in golf PR. I worked with Jerry Foltz on a lot. To hear him on that was actually kind of sad. But it was like, I worked for a cable access station when I was in college, and our production values were a lot better. And this was in the mid 80s. And we had a much better production value. And we're much more, frankly, entertaining than what I watched waiting for my car to go through the car wash and get hand washed.
Let me ask you something. Does it matter? Do the Saudis care that
they don't?
Two guys who would normally watch a golf event aren't? Is there a trigger for them where they go, we're out? And what is their end game? Because they obviously know this. They obviously know the game is not growing. They obviously know it's being mocked. They obviously don't care because they keep throwing money at other players. What is their end game?
I think their end game is to get in. Sorry, Gary. I think their end game is to get a foothold into the United States sports market, and they can do that by basically swamping the PGA Tour with money. I mean, the PGA Tour's legal fees last year were in excess of $20 million, which is unsustainable for a nonprofit, which is what the PGA Tour technically is. They're 501c3, and they're looking to grab a foothold in the United States. They've already got a foothold in England. They own several soccer teams in England, including Manchester City and Newcastle United. As Gary mentioned, they own the Saudi Super League. They're running this Super League that's basically, double A at best soccer. If you were to use it on the same plane, at the same judging as you would judge, baseball leagues. They won in the United States, and they won a foothold, and this is their way of basically trying to force a merger with the PGA Tour, and again, it all comes down to sports washing, and this is their way of doing it, as I see it.
What happened to the merger? Let's go back to that. Wasn't there an agreement 3-4 months ago?
So here's where that stands. Okay. And let's see, the December 31st is what, 13 days from now. From my understanding, my understanding about all this is that I think the PGA Tour is fearful of having the Saudis as their sole investment partner from the standpoint of, they do want to open up this for-profit arm of the PGA Tour. They keep calling it NewCo, very creative name. They've been looking for an additional investment partner to, possibly avoid any kind of, federal government antitrust type of scenarios. And the sense that I get, and again, I'm just reading tea leaves here because the PGA has been kept everything very close to the vest with all this, is that there's some kind of conflict between, or among the Saudis, this investment partner that the PGA announced last week. I think it's called the Sports Strategic Alliance Group. It's a group of names that people in sports are familiar with, guys like John Henry and Tom Werner from the Red Sox, Arthur Blank from the Atlanta Falcons, several other groups, who depending on who you read, are pledging $3 to $4 billion to pump into the tour. Do the Saudis want to be equals in that? Do they want to be the controlling interest in that? My sense is that may be part of the hang up in finally, putting this thing together. What I have found interesting, though, is that recently the DP World Tour, which is the old, the renamed European Tour, has been allowing, is kind of reached out or softened its stance a little bit on LIV. In fact, Louis Oosthuizen, who's always been a favorite of mine just because I love saying his name, he's won a couple DP Tour events after, and he is currently a LIV golfer. So, Barry, you asked that question, what's happened to it? Who the F knows? I mean, it's still, quote, in negotiations.
There's what I've read is there's 5 private equity companies that are still in the mix to get the piece of the pie here. And I mean, they're some of the biggest swinging dicks in private equity. I mean, you got Fenway Sports Group and Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets.
Right.
And who's the other? Oh, Arthur Blank. They're part of that consortium, the Fenway Sports Group. Fenway Sports, as you know, they own the Red Sox. They own Liverpool FC in the Premier League. They own they just bought the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're a major player in sports management. You have this group, Liberty Strategic Capital, which sounds as pretty much as ominous as you would imagine, and especially when you understand that former Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin is the managing partner of this company. He was, as you know, Trump's Treasury Secretary. It also has Todd Boehly, who just is the one of the owners of the Dodgers, who just bought Chelsea, paid $4.5 million to buy Chelsea FC in the Premier League. They're basically 2 of the groups that are angling to get a piece of this. You have this Acorn Growth Company, which is another major private equity firm. Again, it's some of the biggest swinging dicks in American finance are all angling for a piece of this. So they see something is there. And I don't know if this is, if you can call them a white knight, like if you guys both remember the days of the hostile takeover in the 1980s when, companies were buying each other left, right, and center. And if you didn't want to get bought by a certain company, you went out and found a white knight who would buy you up so you wouldn't get bought by the, quote, black knight. I kind of see the American private equity companies as the white knights in this.
You guys are both golf nuts. So let me ask you this question. Baseball seems, up until this past year, to go out of its way to ruin the sport. Nobody quite knows what to do with baseball. The pitcher's clock, I think, was a brilliant move. Maybe the first brilliant move they've had in years.
Yep.
Football, other than the Detroit Lions beating Kansas City that first week, I can't think of one game that really mattered. I think football is getting to the point where you watch it and you literally cannot get through an entire game anymore. I mean, there really is not that much at stake. With the playoff expanding, you've got all these teams in the hunt. The only teams not in the hunt are the Jets and the Giants. I mean, how many teams have been eliminated from postseason play?
And the Chargers.
So the point is, and the Chargers, right, and Carolina. But the point is, Well, are you guys worried as golf fans that golf is actually on a path where it's going to ruin its game? I'm not sure the NFL is even close to it yet. I think it's pretty unwatchable. I think someone's going to die on the field one of these days, and I'm not sure that's going to affect anything. But boredom might.
As long as
Or
there'll be a round of applause as they cart the deceased off the field. But yeah, go ahead.
right. And maybe his last sign before he actually goes into cardiac arrest will be the thumbs up. But I mean, what will golf have to do to ruin to become boxing? I mean, are we on that path, do you think? Or is it
Absolutely.
pretty much just you guys who are aficionados just don't like what's happening to the game? But maybe it's past you two, but maybe it doesn't even matter what golf fans think of it, because baseball fans, the old timers, they don't like any of this. And so what? Baseball has to move on. Golf has to move on. Maybe you guys are dinosaurs.
Well,
Maybe you're missing it.
dinosaurs to a certain extent. But I mean, we're still, whether the PGA Tour cares to admit it or not, we're still their target demo. And if you spend 10 minutes watching a golf tournament, which you'll probably see 6 or 7 minutes of commercials during that 10 minutes, which is another problem the game has, is the broadcasts have become basically unwatchable because the commercial breaks have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and carved more and more into the action. We're still their target market, and those commercials bear that out. Now, the problem they're going to have, and they're starting to have it from what I've been reading and from talking to other people that are golf fanatics and golf fans like Gary and I, is they're going to start losing the 30 and 40 somethings. And, the 40 somethings that have disposable income should be their target market. And they're getting to the point where it's like, I just want to go out, play with my buddies, have a beer, razz them and make some bets. And then I'm going to go to the 19th hole and watch football. They're getting to that point now because of again, how unsustainable the model that they're going to, where that's headed. And we're still the target market because we're the ones with the leisure time and the disposable income, but the ones right behind us that like the game and like to watch it, they're losing interest.
Gary, I want to ask you 2 questions, and Brian, I didn't realize you had disposable income. Since when do you have?
Well, it's all relative, Gary.
Gary's got thousands of viewers. You just lied to him. Gary, give me the Fred Couples quote, and give me the quote from our friend here in Tulsa about his golf habit, his viewing habits, his playing habits. Remember the guy we talked about?
Yeah,
those
yeah.
2 stories.
Sure. Well, and Fred, it's interesting to hear anything from Fred Couples, because he was always, as a player, fairly reticent, a very popular player. But upon, and this kind of relates to John Rahm's signing with Liv, and Rahm in the past saying that he was not, interested in, he was more interested in his legacy than money, that he didn't like the Live format. And then, of course, when, every man has his price, and evidently Rahm's was met. And Couples basically said, I'm going to try to remember the quote as much as I can. Hey, what, 100 million, not enough, 200, not enough, 300, not enough, 400, okay. But grow the game, my ass, was basically Fred's, response to all that. And then, and then in response to, just from, guys, again, like Brian and myself, our mutual friend, John Woodard, in Tulsa, who's a lifelong golfer, was nice enough to invite me to play at Southern Hills, which I'll always be grateful for.
Yeah.
You didn't invite me, though.
But
I'm waiting for my invite.
But John, well, you didn't happen to be in the what was the museum we were in, Barry?
You were at Gilcrease.
Yeah, and also what, you know, before they opened the Dillon Museum, they had some of his stuff displayed.
Native American.
Yeah, that's right. So, but anyway, you know, John said, well, you know what? This is going to give me more time on Saturday and Sunday to play golf. So that pretty much plays, you know, John's a little bit older than I am, retired attorney who fought for the good guys. But in any event, pretty much bears out what you said, Brian. You know, it's still a great game. It's a game, you know, that, you know, I'll play till I can't walk anymore. But you know, my desire to follow, you know, the professional game is really being tested these days.
Let me ask you a question. So baseball, we had 4.5-hour games in the middle of July, and there was a problem with baseball. What was the problem with golf that this happened?
I'll go first, and Brian, you can, you know.
Go ahead. No, go first.
Yeah. I don't think there, you know, if you're talking about professional golf, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe a pace of play. But you know, golf always, you know, as far as presentation, you know, from a fan standpoint, you know, as far as, you know, people who like the game, who love the game, you know, other than the fact that, you know, certainly certain tournaments, you know, the commercials get, you know, the television presentation can be really cumbersome. And I will say that there have been certain advances in that, you know, you have streaming services now that will allow you to, you know, for certain tournaments, allow you to focus in on certain players and certain, you know, groups, certain holes at tournaments. So I do think that the tour has been making some effort to address that. I think really the problem was more from certain players' standpoint, in that they thought that they were being undervalued. You know, certainly Phil Mickelson, you know, has been, you know, extremely outspoken about, poor him, you know, and there are certain complaints that were legitimate. On the other hand, maybe Phil should have been, you know, a little more cautious in his gambling, not put himself into, you know, certain financial straits. But anyway, you know, to me, I think this was more, you know, the Saudis recognizing that there was a certain, you know, discontent among a segment of players. And, you know, let's face it, I mean, you know, back in my IT consulting days, I would have loved to have somebody throw some more money at me to work less. Yeah, you know.
That's essentially what a lot of it comes down to.
Mhm.
And the players that jump to live that are at least honest about it, your Harold Varner the thirds being probably exhibit A of that basically said, yeah, I'm going for the money and I'm going for the fact. And Kevin Na, who I know personally and have probably as good a relationship with him as I do any professional golfer, he basically did it for the family time. I mean, yeah, the money's great, but he's like, I'm going to be home a lot more because I don't have to be out on tour grinding. I mean, it is what it is. You have to there's grudging respect that you have to give for them. At least they're being honest about it, and none of this I'm going out to grow the game garbage when, you know, everybody is making that certain hand gesture when they say it.
Yeah.
You want to do that again?
Oh, go on, Barry.
The hand gesture. Do the hand gesture again.
The hand gesture, yeah.
Okay.
That certain hand gesture.
It's a
When they're trying to tell you.
Yeah.
In Rom's case, I mean, he's going to play what? the probably a handful of the $20 million events, the players, maybe one or two other events, and the majors. And pretty much all he cares about is the majors. Oh, and he'll play a handful of DP World Tour events that he likes to play. Now he can play 2 events a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean
that, it's
well, I mean, whatever events Liv throws him into, but that he's contractually mandated to play.
Yeah.
So he's going to go from playing, maybe 16 events a year, 16, roughly 16 a year, if that, and he's going to play maybe 1 or 2 a month, if that.
There's one point I do want to make that I think Liv is actually doing something smart. And if you look at the field of events that they have going on this year, there's a lot more international play.
Yes.
And last year, their best attended event by far was their event in Australia. Now they're going to play more in Asia, and I still have to believe that Hideki Matsuyama is still a prize target of theirs, although he is still to this point staying on the PGA Tour. But I do think that the PGA Tour they have an event in Mexico, they have one in Canada, and they have the event in Japan.
And Puerto Rico. They have one in Puerto Rico.
They're still technically US.
Yeah. But
point being, though, is that, and classic case of American exceptionalism is, I think that the tour, that the PGA Tour, has kind of missed a boat in taking its game overseas, or partnering with, say, the DP / European Tour, in commingling some of those events to get PGA Tour players more international exposure.
Let me ask you a question. Gary, you like the Eagles. When the Eagles lost in the Super Bowl, that affected you because your team lost. They're all millionaires. They all went home to their millions, and they weren't losers, but they lost. When Tiger was beating Mickelson all those years, you got the sense that Phil lost and wasn't as good, and it mattered to people who like Mickelson. Does it matter that Jon Rahm will lose anything, anywhere? Does it matter that anybody on this Live Tour will come in second or third when we know the salaries, when we know the guarantees? Does it matter anymore about the winners and losers in golf other than the majors?
Not on
when maybe you have a connection with somebody during the weekend. But will any of the other tournaments matter to anybody?
Depends. There are guys that there are guys that I root for on tour. Victor Hovland, I love. I think he's got just a great perspective and great game, and I think he's a guy who's got a few majors in his future. And there's a few other players that I like to watch, I like to see play. But again, in answer to your question, it's now that the way that things are now, it's really come down to the majors, and other than that, you're going to be hard pressed really to, unless somebody emerges, coming up. The one thing that I will say, and I think Brian would probably agree with this, is that there's a wealth of young talent, coming up through the college ranks, coming from overseas, that could emerge now.
Yeah, there's great golfers that are going to win majors that we haven't heard of yet.
Yeah. Ludwig,
because they're right now in high school or even younger. Maybe a few are still in college, but there's an ungodly level of talent there that is absolutely without question and beyond our ability to comprehend right now. That's what I'm talking about, how the game is growing. It's growing organically. It's not growing due to the professional game. It's not growing because of what John Rahm or Victor Hovland or Brooks Koepka or anybody of that ilk is doing per se. It's growing organically. It's growing because people want to play this game. They maybe see it or somebody they know sees it and plays it, and they want to play and they want to start. That's what's going to grow the game, not this complete, money grab between, the Saudis and private equity with the PGA Tour caught in the middle looking for the easiest way out.
Okay, other than the end of American democracy, which is coming, let me ask you the most important question on anyone's mind. What's going on with the golf ball? That's really what America wants to know. Trump and the golf ball. What's the problem with the golf ball?
Frankly, nothing as far as I'm concerned. But there is this opinion that's not borne out by reality when you burrow into the numbers, that the golf ball basically being juiced up, like we talked about, you talk about the baseball being juiced up. The baseball maybe wasn't juiced up. The golf ball definitely is. I mean, they have made inroads on the golf ball over the last 20-25 years. Gary, am I even overstating that?
Well, hey, beyond that, we started out with a ball made of goose feathers.
Yeah.
That then was made out of gutta percha, which dentists use, to fill cavities. Okay. And then it just kind of evolved from there. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So technology.
Technology in golf has probably made more of an impact than technology in any other sport. And it's made the game more enjoyable. It's made the game easier to play, and it's a hard bleeping game to play in the first place. And there's this thought, Barry, that the golf ball has basically outkicked the coverage of what the golf courses can handle. And that these beautiful classic courses that were all designed in the early and even some cases middle of the 20th century are now obsolete. And they're obsolete because professional golfers are able to get in there and basically overpower a classic golf course. And this doesn't sit well with certain people. And because of that, yeah, it doesn't sit well with certain people, company included. And as a result, there has been this push it's gone on for the better part of 20 years. I mean, it started in probably in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, where the golf ball was just starting to take off, and people were basically saying, we need to rein the golf ball in, and we're going to make golf obsolete if we don't rein the golf ball in. And so as a result, there has been this ebb and flow, this give and take, this yin and yang about how are we going to do this. And they kept talking about this idea called bifurcation, which is the golf ball gets reined in for the elite golf, for the professional golfers and the elite amateurs, and it gets left alone for the Gary Popoviches and Brian Robbins of the world. And that was more or less what was going to happen until recently, when the equipment manufacturer said, we're not going to be able to do this. And as a result, and I'll let Gary finish the rest of the thought, you are going to have a non-juiced golf ball parameters starting in 2030, I believe, and the pros are going to start implementing them in 2028.
And right now the balls are juiced?
What? No, they're
very much so.
But so now here's part of the issue. And yes, the very best golfers are indeed overpowering a lot of great old classic golf courses. What the without getting too deep into the weeds, basically, the USGA and the R&A, which are the two ruling bodies of golf in the world, okay, what they have proposed is to in their testing right now, I believe the maximum swing speed that's tested is around 118 to 120 miles per hour. The USGA wanted to bump that up to 127 miles per hour because young Charlie Woods who's 14 years old, is generating a swing speed like that, as are many of the professionals. There was some pushback to that, so now it goes down to 125 miles per hour. The net result of this is that this, in theory, is that this should reduce the carry distance for the very best players by about 15 to 20 yards, depending on who you talk to. For guys like Brian and I, the distance might be 5 yards because our swing speeds aren't anywhere near that. And honestly, as I get older, I'm going to lose that distance regardless. But I think there's two issues here. Number one, in every other sport, okay, there's a set of rules for professionals. There's a set of rules for the rest of us. Golf has resisted that for years. The main reason why it's resisted that for years is that the equipment companies and the ruling bodies, the USGA and the R&A, have had this, the ruling bodies set up these parameters for equipment. The manufacturers, because they want to make more money, because they want to put out new product, they want to keep their business going, keep coming out with stuff year after year that pushes those levels to the limit. And again, I just went out, I bought a PXG 311 XF driver because it was on sale. It's normally a $500 club that they're still showing for $200 right now. Is it going to help me? Damned if I know. But I know a professional using, there's already bifurcation in golf anyway. Professionals are using equipment that we never see.
Exactly.
So, why the ball became such an issue to these guys is beyond me. You may have to hit an extra club going into a green. Big freaking whoop for these guys. What really needs to happen if they want to really rein in distance is it's not just the ball. It's the kind of shafts used. It's a face. It's a material that's used on club faces. Titanium. The thinner you can do a face, the more of a bounce effect that the ball has off of the club, producing greater distance. Maybe that needs to be reined in for the professionals. It's a variety of things. I personally would like to see that happen because right now, at the professional level, it's a game of bomb and gouge. They don't care if they hit in the rough or in the fairway. These guys generate such swing speeds and have such equipment that they can, that if they hit in the rough, it doesn't matter to them. It can be, unless it's true U.S. Open 3 to 4 inch, Bermuda or fescue rough, they can get it out of there. Bryson DeChambeau proved that at Wingfoot several years ago. So, to me, I don't think we're that far apart on this, Brian, to be honest. The fact is that, we aren't building bigger baseball parks because these guys are, they all use the same ball, right? Football, the Duke, Wilson, the Duke, produces professional football. So though Tom Brady has banned the Patriot deflators, like to try to play around with it from time to time, but Yeah, I don't see why at the professional level why they can't use
You know what sport has kept its integrity through all this?
bowling.
Bowling.
I, I know
Bowling has kept it. They cannot master bowling, and the sport stays the same. There's ghost bowling and there's midnight bowling, but the game has kept its integrity.
It has kept its integrity. Hey, Gary, let me give you a nice little counterpoint to this. The average length of a PGA Tour course in 2022 was a tick under 7,200 yards. Okay. How far do you think the average player is carrying a driver these days? The average man is carrying it 215 yards. The average woman's carrying it 147.
Yeah, but we're not.
Why are we making what? Why are we making this game? Why do we need?
We're not playing it at 7,200 yards.
No, we're not. But the point being is, why do we have to make the game harder for the Gary Popoviches and Brian Robbins of the world? I mean, we don't.
It isn't making a bit of difference for me when I'm playing a 6,000-yard course.
Well,
you and I play, basically.
Yeah, we play courses. You know, the longest course I'll play these days is probably 6,500 yards. Most of the courses I play, like you said, 6,000 to 6,100. But the point being, why do we have to make the game harder? We didn't raise the nets because of Michael Jordan in basketball. We don't raise the nets because of Novak Djokovic tennis. We don't. No other sport puts barriers up for its players like golf does. And I mean, if you want to talk about the tour and what they're doing on courses, remember back in 2013 when they played the U.S. Open at Marion, and everybody was freaking out about how much they were going to, burn Marion to the ground because it was less than 700,000 yards. The winning score there was 1 under par. That was Justin Rose.
Yeah, because they narrowed the fairways to 10 yards wide, and
they didn't narrow them. They didn't narrow them to 10 yards wide. They narrowed them, yeah, and they grew the rough. And the course still played to roughly par. And then 4 years later, they're playing at Erin Hills in Wisconsin. That's playing almost 7,700. It's playing over 7,700 yards. And Brooks Koepka takes it apart and shoots 16 under. I mean, length is not the be all and end all.
Fairways were wider and wet, so balls weren't like.
Well, it's still a distance thing. You could still play some of these courses if you set them up right, and they're still going to play where roughly 5 or 6 under par is going to win, which is about what should win at US Open.
Well, again, we talk at professional level. You and I are, I've gotten to play Erin Hills a couple times. I played it at 6,300 yards. It was all the golf that I wanted to handle. I think it's all the golf that most.
So why should you make it harder to play that then? Why should obstacles be put in your way that should detract from how the game is because you won't play a 6,300 yard course?
5-yard distance difference.
I think it's going to be more than that. I think by the time in the wash, and all you have to do is play, they're building more and more courses now with more and more forward tees. And so all you have to do is play a tee, less than 5%. And you could probably verify this because of your yeoman work at Steamboat Springs. But I mean, most people aren't playing courses from the tips anymore.
I'm not. I never have.
No, I'm certainly not. But why do we need to make the game harder? Rory McIlroy didn't fall out of bed and hit 340-yard drives. He bulked himself up and he worked hard to be able to do that.
Right.
That's on him more than it's on the ball. And I don't see why we have to put obstacles in the way of a game that's already flipping difficult to play in the first place.
Let me ask you something. World Series, Super Bowl, 60, 70,000 people watch. A lot of casual fans. Casual golf fan, what is he or she getting out of this whole discussion? What matters to him or her coming up the Masters in April? Balls and distance and fairways width. What will the game do to him or her in the next couple of years?
In the next couple of years, nothing, because none of this goes into effect until 2028. And honestly, again, at that level of play, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But to try to put this into some, perspective, okay. And I'll just use an example at the Masters. All right. So years ago, and I'm talking like back, say pre-19 mid-90s. Okay, there's a classic par five on the back nine at Augusta, the 13th. It's a short for a par five hole. It's fairly short, and at the time it played under 500 yards, which is very short for a par five hole, at the professional level. But it was what they call a risk reward hole. So if you hit a good drive then, if you want to hit into the green with, to attempt to hit the green in two and possibly have a putt for eagle, a golfer might be hitting another fairway wood or a long iron, 2 or 3 or 4 iron. These days, the hole plays longer at 510 yards. And if you hit a good drive now, you're hitting a 7 or 8 iron into that green. So, and this is, so basically you've, if you watch, what's interesting, Barry, is now they have a women's amateur tournament at Augusta the week before the Masters. They actually play the course the way it was intended to be. Their club selections, and even though they're hitting a little farther these days, than they used to, they play that course the way that it was originally intended, with the yardages that they hit it. Bryson DeChambeau said that, it was a par 72 course that turned into par 67 for him. And while he's never really played well at the Masters, the point is that, it is a course that, potentially can be overpowered. And what that does is that's kind of turned the game, from a guy, say like a Lee Trevino, who, could hit every shot in the book. He wasn't necessarily the longest player out there, but, he knew how to work the ball. He could alter his trajectory. He could have slice. He could have fade. He could, hit every club in the book. That's a lot of that's been taken out away from the game, because of, the distance that these guys are hitting it now.
Hey, Brian, let me ask you a question. What does the game do without Tiger Woods?
It's a great question. I don't think they have an answer to that yet. Because I don't see another Tiger coming through that door. We talked about this earlier, where there's some great players that we've never heard of. But we heard of Tiger when he was in elementary school. I haven't heard of the next player who's in elementary school that's showing up on talk shows and putting with Bob Hope on the Mike Douglas show and doing the things that Tiger did. And I think this is something that has the tour completely freaked out. And again, it all comes back to how do they market the game and how do they keep the players that can market the game on the reservation? I don't know what they do, Barry. I honestly don't. And I worked in the golf industry for 13 years promoting golf tournaments. And I saw the players come in and out of media centers, and nobody moved the needle like Tiger, and nobody still moves the needle like Tiger. They had a tournament last weekend, the PNC Challenge in Florida. It used to be the old father-son, and in fact, I'm wearing a wind shirt from when I did the PR for that tournament for 4 years in the mid-aughts. And it was always a great event because you'd have a major champion play with their son, or in Arnold Palmer's case, his grandson, or in Fuzzy Zeller's case, his daughter. And it was always a wonderful event. and it was always an event that people paid attention to because it was the last chance to get to see your Jacks and your Arnie's and your Lee Trevinos, although Lee, I guess, is still playing in this event now.
Mhm.
But you didn't, if you watched this tournament this past weekend, you probably, unless you were like paying attention, you probably didn't know that Bernhard Langer and his youngest son Jason won the tournament because everything was on Tiger and Charlie Woods and what they were doing. And that tells you where this game is and where it's going. That a 47-year-old hobbled Tiger Woods, who's probably going to play one event a month, maybe in 2024. And I mean, I would put maybe in bold and underline it, that they're showing him finishing 5th place. And you barely saw Bernhard Langer, who's won this thing 5 times, who won the tournament.
And, and I've written about this a little bit. I mean, people want to crown Tiger's son, who is, obviously talented, but in terms of accomplishment, other than, appearing with dad in this tournament, and cracking wise, on
Yeah,
camera with him.
he's got more charisma than his dad did. That's for darn sure.
At the same time, and I mean, boy, he's got a lot of talent for a 14-year-old kid. But at the same
Great
time,
swing too.
but at the same time, he's not the best player on his high school team.
No.
And as far as Tiger, pretty much, Tiger dominated pretty much every level of golf he ever played at, and Charlie has yet to win anything. One of the breeding grounds is the American Junior Golf Association, and Charlie hasn't won out there despite having his dad on the bag a couple of times. So I guess the point of it, there's a couple things to that, Barry. How do we survive Tiger? Every era has had somebody come along, who's advanced the game somehow. We had Bobby Jones, you had Hogan, you had Arnie and Jack, and there was a lull, and then Tiger came along. We're probably going to be in a lull for a little bit. What's going to require, in my mind, is somebody who not only, who has tremendous ability, but somebody who has a lot of charisma. I'd still these days would rather, watch and listen to Lee Trevino than most guys on the tour.
You're not the only one.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about that, though, Gary and Barry. The talent level of junior golfers has increased 1,000-fold since Tiger. So what you're going to have, what you're going to have for another Tiger or another Phil-esque player to come into the picture is you're going to have someone who's got just transcendent talent. I mean, there are players that play Division I mid-major golf right now that 25 years ago would have been playing at one of the powers, would have been playing it at Oklahoma State or a Stanford or a Duke or a UCLA. But because the talent level has gotten so much greater at that level, they're playing at a mid-major like, I don't know, Cal State Fullerton, for example. The gratuitous plug of my alma mater.
I know we were going to get that.
Well, I bet the under.
Plug aside, somebody is going to have a level of talent that we really can't get our brain around right now to be another Tiger.
I did an interview once with the University of Tulsa golf coach, who told me the 2 most important players in recent memory were Tiger Woods and John Daly. Because Daly also sort of broke out of the mold. Daly was also a golfer that people looked at and said, "That's me. I can do that." And that Daly's effect on the public and golf was a good one. all things considered, not the golfers, but to the for people to attract to the sport. Daly did a nice job, and that maybe golf needs somebody like that. I mean, I always thought it was wonderful that who was the tennis player? Was it Andrea Jaeger? Was that her name? She
Who did
married
what?
the
It wasn't Andrea Jaeger, yeah.
yeah, and she married the Detroit Red Wing hockey player, right? Wasn't there some connection?
Oh,
Anyway,
you're thinking Anna Kournikova.
Anna
She
Kournikova.
married Sergei Fedorov.
Anna Kournikova never won a match anywhere, and yet she had an impact on the game. She got to the semifinals of something, but she never won a match. And yet we remembered her. I remember her, right? Sort of.
Oh, yeah, you remember her, but
yeah. Does golf need an Anna Kournikova? Does golf need another John Daly more than it needs a Tiger Woods?
Well, if it gets a John Daly that can actually, I mean, John Daly won 2 majors.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, and I've said this many times, was one of the greatest wastes of talent in the history of the game.
amen.
He should have won. Because he had everybody talked about his length, but John had an amazing touch around the green. He could putt. He had no holes in his game except the one between his ears. And if he had an iota of self-control, would have torn golf up before Tiger came along.
Yeah.
Because he had it all.
Yeah.
So if you could find a John Daly that didn't have in the proverbial words from Bull Durham, $1 million game and a 5-cent head, yeah, I think that could grow the game.
Yeah.
Lacking that, as I said, I don't know. We need somebody who's got talent that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, all right. How about closing thoughts from both of you? Gary, go first.
Well, going back to one of Brian's original points is that while the professional game remains a mess, or is a mess, the game from a participation standpoint is probably in the best shape it's been in, and I will say in my lifetime. We have more people playing. There are so many different ways now to get involved with the game, just from, things like, team building exercises at a place like Top Golf, or at the place, your competitor in Tulsa that you and I visited, Barry, Golf Suites. But, there are a lot of ways to get introduced to the game these days. And, I've seen it in, it's been really gratifying to watch, what's going on in our little town in Colorado. And, we have a great setup in that we have a 9-hole course that, beginning players feel very comfortable in going around playing. We're not, we don't enforce a strict dress code or anything like that. We do ask people to, to observe the etiquette of the game, and particularly to make sure that they move along at a good place, and we enforce that. But it's rare that somebody finishes, 9 holes at our course and not say they've had a good time. We have other courses in town, where each year, the number of rounds are increasing. So, from a from a participant standpoint, the game is in great shape. I just wish that some intelligent group of people would prevail in this mess between Liv and PGA to make sure that to try to make some sense out of all this. But I'm not optimistic.
Right.
Well said, Gary. Like I said earlier, golf has gone up. 2023 has marked the 6th straight year that we've had greater participation in the game than the year before. And the reasons Gary laid out, pretty much speak for themselves. So you get a community where you've got a nice course and you've got people that care about going to that course, and you've got an active junior program. The game will thrive. The problem that we're having again is at the professional level, and it's not just live versus the PGA Tour. I mean, that's the main event. The undercard is what's happening underneath it, where you've got a lot of professionals right now that were making a good living as tour pros, but they want to eat from a bigger spoon. It wasn't enough. And again, we're not paying money to go see the James Haans and the Chris Strouds and the Dylan Fratellis of the world. And those people want to be paid like the Tiger Woodses and the Phil Mickelsons. They want to know where their money is. Where's mine? And what that's doing is it's absolutely harming the tour at levels that people aren't paying attention to, because they're paying attention to the whole live versus PGA Tour thing. But what that's doing is that's harming the tournaments that are the lifeblood of a lot of these communities. You take an event, say the American Express, the old Bob Hope tournament that I actually worked on that tournament for 13 years. They're struggling. They've gone through 3 different presenting sponsors in less than a decade. And what you're having are these smaller tournaments in these smaller communities that aren't going to be able to keep up with this arms race of greater purses and less revenue for the nonprofits that they support. That tournament is known as the tournament that built a hospital. It built the Eisenhower Medical Center in Rancho Mirage, which is actually a world-class medical facility. And that tournament built it. And as a result, they're getting less and less money every year because the purses have to keep going up and up. And so what that's doing to communities that aren't able to put on $20 million or $25 million tournaments, that's going to be the casualty that nobody's paying attention to in this whole money arms race that we're seeing. And that's a shame. That's going to hurt a lot of nonprofits that these tournaments support across the country.
Right on.
Think about that when you're thinking about these arms races and people asking, where's mine?
On that happy note, the world's going to hell. That's it. I'm moving to Iceland.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Find a
Grab
new
your
model.
bowling bag and go bowling, Barry. That'll clear things up.
That's right.
I thought you were
Telling you.
I thought it was Portugal, Barry.
Oh, what I said, whatever. Whoever will take me.
Yeah, you can take me to Portugal too.
All right. Well,
before we go, Barry, I do need to, as is our custom, show
what do you got?
what's in Gary's office. So I own 2 ties, a black one for going to funerals, and then this one, which is my old Tom Morris tie.
Wow.
It's my favorite tie. I wear it to every festive occasion. Although since I've moved here, I think I've worn it once. Steamboat Springs is a very informal town.
Very nice.
But anyway,
That's a nice tie. Where'd you get it, Gary?
I actually got it in a in some airports they have those, they have PGA stores.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually bought it prior to a stopover on the way to Scotland, because I remembered that my then wife and I were going to be going out to dinner at a relatively fancy place one night, and I didn't have a tie. So there you go.
I was waiting to hear I bought it at the old course after I played the old course, or I bought it at the old course gift shop after I played the old course.
It would have cost me 3 times as much.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it one bit.
Anyway, Barry, thanks once again for really driving a good conversation.
Absolutely.
This was great.
No, you guys, I just get in the way. You guys don't need me, but anyway.
No, you played a great traffic cop, Barry. You played a great traffic cop. The questions were insightful and got me thinking.
Well, all right. Well, thank you guys. And again, I hope your sport survives. If not, I'm telling you about bowling.
I bowled all the time growing up with my dad. My dad and I, every Saturday morning, we'd
Yes.
bowl. And we had to be home by 3:30, because that's when the Professional Bowlers Tour came on with Chris Schenkel and Nelson
Yes.
Burke Jr.
And
And we had to be home before 3:30, because if we weren't, the stud puppet would lose it. And
remember how that
made
worked?
sure we were home every time, every Saturday morning to watch bowling,
Yeah,
or every Saturday afternoon.
The 5th place finisher got $5,000. That was just enough to make expenses driving from town to town.
Exactly.
And the one guy got the bye to the first round, to the last round. Remember that?
Yes.
5,000. Earl Anthony, Earl Anthony, right? There was Mark Roth
and Marshall Holman, who bought me a beer one time when I interviewed
There you
him
go.
at the Old Town Square Lanes in Riverside, California, when they had a
Right.
summer stop on the tour there.
Brian, you drop more names than Barry does. That's it.
The only sport in America that's interrupted periodically by a plate of nachos and a pitcher of beer. There you go.
See, I'm old.
All growing up, Barry. All growing up, me and the stud puppet.
Tell you what.
I'm old school with bowling because my guy was Chris Schenkel and Billy Whaley.
Oh, yeah, you go back before Bo Burton.
Oh yeah, no. Well, Bo Burton was bowling then, and then you had
Who was the Nelson guy? There was a Nelson guy who worked with
Nelson
Chris
Burton
Schenkel.
Jr.
Yeah.
Nelson Burton Jr. Right?
Yeah, he was the analyst to Chris Schenkel on the on your PPA
Billy
telecast.
Billy Whaley preceded.
Billy Whaley preceded him. Yeah.
And then some Dick Weber and Don Carter and all those guys. You know, the old St. Louis Budweiser team.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
You
this.
don't think I know bowling, Barry? Let me tell you. All right.
I can draw bowling trivia with the best of them.
I
Grew up
can't. I'm pretty
bowling.
much out. That's all
I
know.
didn't start playing golf till I got to college. My dad and I, as I said, growing up, it was bowling. My dad would always tell you he would bowl, you know, he bowled into his 80s with a 16-pound ball. He'd make sure he told you that every time he bowled. I don't use a lighter ball. I use a 16-pound ball. Made a point of that. He was good too.
Okay. Barry, take us out of here.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's talk next week when you know, the Saudis buy 3 of us.
Yeah.
What's happening next.
I'm up for bid.
Yeah, me too. All right.
Yeah. Makes 3 of us.